Welcome back to the Men of Iron podcast. This month we are talking about faith in sports, and I have an honor and a privilege to be here with Josh Beers. How are you?
Outstanding. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for just jumping in here with us. We're here at Clipper Magazine Stadium for a reason. You're the chaplain here with the Stormers, and something that we're super excited about. Just kind of learn about you first, like family, kids, wife. What's that look like? And kind of tell us a little bit of your backstory.
Thank you so much, because that's where it really all begins for me and what it really means most to me. And I've been married now for 30 plus years. My wife has stood behind all of the different investments that my journey has taken me, and a lot of that has overlapped into the sports world, but she's the rock in our family and been an amazing wife and mother, and stood by my side for 30 plus years. 4 adult children. Our oldest is currently down in grad school at Johns Hopkins University studying genetic counseling. Our middle daughter married, so we added a son. They just moved to Virginia. A son is a senior down at a college near Philadelphia. And then my daughter, our youngest, is freshman in college right now. So we're empty nesting and hopefully finding more ways to integrate faith and sport. I don't know if my wife's as excited as I am about it.
So when we talk about a little bit right there, you're talking about kind of the backbone, your wife's your rock. How did it look before that? What's your faith story? Like, where did it start for you? How did you get to this point? I mean, you've been with the Stormers a little bit over 10 years now. What's that look like, and how'd that journey get to this point?
Well, it's neat that you ask it that way, Colton, because for me, being part of the Stormers really goes back to what my journey was. I grew up, probably the best way to say it is my dad grew up in Philadelphia without a father. My mom immigrated over from Poland. My dad was a fantastic basketball player, and but was not a believer. Came to know Christ in his early 20s. But I was born into a family of 7 children, Christian family, but my faith was there. It was there all the time, like being pushed towards me. But if you said, what did I worship growing up? It was sports. So my big G God would have been sports. I lived for whatever athletic season we were in. I loved it, loved to play, loved to do all these things. So I thought that's what my dream was, to pursue a career in sports broadcasting. God grabbed a hold of my life, and where my faith journey really began to take root was as a freshman in college. I realized that what I was worshiping was temporal, and I was living for the next moment, which was the next competition, next athletic event. And God shifted my focus, grabbed a hold of my heart, rescued me. And in that process, I believed at that moment that, okay, I know what I've been worshiping, and that sports has got to go way to the back burner. It's God's got to be on the front. And God, in his kindness and graciousness, said, no, I don't want sports. I gave you that love for sports, but under the umbrella of worshiping me. Wow. And so when you come full circle to be sitting here today at Clipper Stadium, and the reality of using sports as a platform to point people to Christ and building character and making disciples, that's been the journey. So God in his kindness has allowed my life journey the last 30 plus years post-college to be using athletics as a platform to build lives and to advance the gospel.
When you said about being the chaplain and you're just talking about this backstory, like I feel like sometimes we hear this a lot of identity was in sports, and talking through this like faith in sports, that's something guys hold on to a lot. Yeah. Like I'm a baseball player, that's what I am and that's all I know. And it's so interesting to be able to have that, create that differentiator for you, like I got to put sports back, but God's saying, no, I gave you that gift. I gave that to you, but now use it for me.
Yeah, so well said. And I think the key is, what am I finding my identity in? Is my identity found in who I am in Christ, or is my identity found in what I do? Yeah. For athletes who are, you get out on the field there, everyone knows, do you get a hit? If you're pitching, did you get people out? Whatever sport you play, you're measured by that scoreboard. And so I think it magnifies that identity. But what's the difference if in my job, how successful I am, how much money do I make? We have all these measurements that should be secondary to, what God's love for me is unconditional. My identity is found in who he says I am, not what I accomplish, which actually frees me up then to live out whatever he wants to do with me, because the pressure is not on me to achieve something. My salvation and what he's achieved for me allows me actually to live more freely within who he's created me to be.
We talk a lot at Men of Iron about Proverbs 27:17. Oh, yeah. That's like, I feel like the verse, right? Iron sharpens iron. What does that look like for you? When I say that to you, what comes to mind when you think of it in the sports world, maybe from the sports side, but also how God uses that maybe to sharpen guys on the field, off the field? What's that look like?
I love, first of all, what a phenomenal verse. And because of the reality of what does it look like to somebody to be, there's so many ways we're sharpened, but the reality of I'm always looking in my own faith journey, who's a little bit ahead of me in my journey. I mentioned being a dad. My wife and I constantly look for people who are a few years ahead of where our kids were and asking them questions and letting them be iron sharpening me in my life. In the athletic world, the best in the world all have coaches and who are pushing them and sharpening them and taking them to new levels. And certainly the application spiritually, like where am I finding people who might have a little more maturity in this area of their life, or might have demonstrated a character quality that I want to see God shape more into my life? And am I going to them and rubbing shoulders with them, asking them for feedback, asking for accountability, whatever those dynamics look like in my life, so that I can take the next step in my journey? And that's what, to me, iron sharpening iron is, that whole idea of what's the next step look like in my journey? Because I don't want to plateau. There's no athlete out here on this field that says, hey, I peaked. There's nowhere to go to get better. No, you come down on a Sunday morning when I'm doing chapel and they're all in the cage hitting because they want to take another step. And there's a hitting coach in there with them, iron sharpening iron.
That's so good. Where would you say someone could find somebody like that? I think that's maybe a struggle for guys. Like, where do I find someone that can actually sharpen me? Where do I look? What should I turn to? Because sometimes I feel like they can go the opposite way, turn to drugs, alcohol, and these things because they think that helps them. But where do they find someone that can actually speak into their life and be that one step ahead for them?
That's a great question. I think part of it to me is, am I looking?
Come on.
Am I looking? Am I saying, you know what, I'm really looking out for myself? Because when I'm looking out for myself, I'm going to chase things I think are going to be temporary satisfactions. Yeah. But if I'm looking around saying, it's not just at church, but that's one of the places we find them. But we found even in baseball chapel, there's been multiple guys who along the way have come alongside, hey, Josh, this is what I'm at. Hey, let's connect you. And they're around us all the time if we're looking. Yeah. And if we're asking God to help show them to us. Help me find somebody who can challenge me in this area of my life. Yeah. But I would say this to someone who genuinely says, Colton, I can't find anybody. Go ask a couple people you respect. I'm looking to grow in this area. Do you know of anybody? But you better be ready when they say, oh, I can point you 2 or 3 different people. Because the reality is most people that are struggling to find a mentor, it's because they're really not pursuing that relationship, because there are, or it could be a fear that, that person would never want to take time for me. Be surprised how many people find it a great joy to say, yeah, I'd love to pour in and give back. And I think that's in that spiritual realm or whatever area of life, I've been amazed. Just ask God, ask somebody.
I love that. You have to be looking. Yeah. Like, that's real. Like, you got to be actually searching for it and actually asking God for it. I think sometimes we get like, oh God, whatever, but you got to be specific. Yeah. God, I'm looking for someone to speak into this area of my life. And thinking of that, like, who were mentors in your life that kind of spoke in maybe from early on to maybe they're different now, but what were those mentors for you?
There's a couple people that immediately come to mind. Probably the greatest mentor that on this earth that God's given me outside of my dad, who's been with the Lord now for 16 years. My dad was, without a doubt, the most influential person in my life by the way he lived his life. He was a roofing salesman. But I never knew a man who was more committed to his walk with God, committed to his family, committed to being faithful to whatever God called him to do, and had an incredible impact with his life. My college soccer coach, Jim Phillips, came alongside. Remember, my faith journey really took root in my freshman year of college. I was all of a sudden with a coach who was coaching for 2 scoreboards, and I only had ever known one. What everybody sees is scoreboard. And all of a sudden, he's talking about life impact and who you are 10, 15 years from now is the real definition of success. And what do we teach through that? And all of a sudden, I'm saying, wait a second here. We just got to beat the next opponent. Yeah. And he's teaching character that I would say was the greatest class I ever took in college was men's soccer. Didn't get credit for it, but it was a fantastic experience because of a life mentor. And now we're 30 plus years later. He's got some health issues, whatever else, and our lives connect still every couple of weeks. We reconnect into his journey. And then along the way, there's been some people who saw in me what I didn't see in myself. And one of them was Randy Hurst when I first took a job right out of college. He saw some leadership capacity in me. I said, all I want to do is be a coach. And he's like, well, I want to, and began to see. I think all of us need people, one, who see in us what we don't see in ourselves. I think that's part of God's working in our lives. Yep. And they challenge us or push us towards something that's part of that coaching, mentoring. Yep. And that's where I think the point you made earlier about mentors is so valuable, Colton, because if we don't look for mentors, then I start to become complacent and satisfied. But it's usually mentors who then help us go places and climb mountains we otherwise never would have been able to.
Yeah, I love it. You got me fired up over here. I love it.
Well, whatever we do, we stand on those shoulders.
Yeah.
And then our prayer is that some days others can stand on our shoulders.
Yeah.
Because it's not really, ultimately, the story's not about us, because our identity's found in Him. It all comes full circle so beautifully.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Men of Iron podcast. Men, are you ready for a game plan that transforms your life? If you find yourself searching for more or feel like your life isn't unfolding as expected, or maybe you're just striving to reach your fullest potential, we've created a Man's Game Plan to help you thrive. Man's Game Plan is a 5-session course designed by Men of Iron with the purpose of helping men develop a game plan for their core 5: faith, family, friends, fitness, and finances. A Man's Game Plan refreshed and redesigned for your men's group. Find out more at menofiron.org.
Why do you think guys need mentors? We talk about that a little bit, but then also I want to ask this side of it. How are you currently leading them? So that little piece of, we talked a little bit already why they need them, but also what are you doing currently that helping to lead guys and actually mentor them?
Yeah. I think the question, why do guys need mentors? I think we maybe could add to that why sometimes it's so difficult for guys to acknowledge that they need mentors or to pursue the mentors. Because I think there's a little bit of the way we've created this image of like, do I want to admit that I struggle? Wow. And yet we all struggle.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things for me with baseball chapel was one time I invited one of the coaches a couple years ago to chapel. He goes, "Chapel's not for me." I said, "Tell me more." He said, "Well, if you knew what I did this past week." I said, "Well, then chapel's only for guys like you, because we only allow sinners into chapel." And so I think a little bit of that for us as guys is, can we break through that initial shell and say, you know what, I need someone speaking to my life. Yeah. And because I think the evil one would love to isolate us. Yep. And why guys need mentors so much, and why I think it's hard sometimes, is we want to be self-dependent, or we don't want to admit our shortcomings or our struggles or our weaknesses, when in reality that's a sign of strength. Yeah. And so I think we need it if we're as men saying I need a mentor, that's a sign of strength. Yeah. And if I say no, I got it right now, I'm in trouble. And I think for me in my life here, I'm now 53 years old, doing a lot more of the mentoring, but am I still pursuing mentoring? Mm-hmm. And so for me, what it looks like is actively continuing to pursue people speaking into my life. And then in turn, God reveals the opportunities to speak into others' lives. And to me, mentoring is, what am I learning? Yeah. Because if I'm regurgitating what I learned 10, 15 years ago, I'm probably not connecting and letting the Holy Spirit work through me. So I need, how did Paul say it? The things you've learned from me, commit to faithful men who then will teach others also. But that cycle has that tiers. And, there's got to be, I need a Paul in my life. And then I need a Timothy that I'm pouring into the things I'm learning from the Paul in my life, is how I think of this whole area of discipleship. It's got to be both ways if it's going to be fresh and real. Because Colton, I don't know what you're struggling with. Mm-hmm. But I'll bet if we really got offline, we'd probably say, hey, someone's going through the same struggles. Yeah. How do we sharpen one another?
Yeah. Do you think, and this is kind of going towards that player side, you're dealing with players in the chapel, how hard is it for them to live out faith? I mean, we put these guys on a pedestal. Yeah. We have fans fill the stadium, cheering, yelling their names, clapping them up. How hard is it then to continue that walk and staying humble, not putting their identity in it? How does that look like for them?
I will say this, one of the great joys for me has been watching the depth of some of these guys' faith journeys. Mm-hmm. I mean, most seasons as a chaplain, I'm not on the road with them. I'm with them Sundays. Sometimes they're home. I might connect a few other times. And they're running Bible studies. And I wonder how many men are out there starting their own Bible studies at their workplace. This is their workplace. They're starting Bible studies. They're coming back saying, hey, Josh, we're working through this. Hey, we're digging into Romans this year. I said, guys, how'd you pick Romans? This is going to be deep stuff here. Hey, we're diving in. It is hard because they're on a pedestal. And there's things that come with that elevate pride. And we know God's opinion on pride. So I think they face a greater challenge. For me with chapel, that's been really neat is there's this place where they are safe to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so some of my greatest conversations come on the back end of chapel. We'll be walking down because we do it upstairs, and then player will say, hey, can I talk to you? And then there's that authenticity in their life journey, like, hey, Josh, I'm struggling. Or, hey, I'm on the road away from my family a lot, and it's been hard for me. Will you pray for me? Yeah. It's like, hey, you know what? we're all going through the same battles together. How do we lean into that? So again, it's that willingness for players, I think, because they're expected, because we see them on display, they've got to carry a certain aura.
Mm-hmm.
And do, again, create the environments where we can just be authentically honest, because God sees us the way we are anyhow.
For talking about that, we're talking about the Stormers as a whole. You've been in this community for a while, but thinking this through, what is the impact of faith having in this region, in this community? Not only maybe the position here as a chaplain, but we've talked about you kind of have a couple different hats in a couple different arenas.
Yeah.
What's faith looking like in this area, and how's it moving on and having that true impact?
Well, it's really neat for me because athletics, again, when I went back to my journey, sports was such a shaper in my life. And I think sometimes we look at the way society has taken things. We don't have any question that sports holds an undue place in our society. Now we, as Christ followers, choose, do we run from that or do we move towards it and leverage it for kingdom purposes? Do we say, wait a second, what an opportunity this presents? What natural mentoring can come from a coach to players, et cetera? And so, like I tell these guys all the time, guys, there are kids who are going to walk up to you today and want your autograph. Like, your platform is right there. You're either going to choose to leverage it or not leverage it. And so for me, sports, and why we should unapologetically want to be successful on the scoreboard everybody sees, is the more we win, the greater our platform to point to what true winning really is. And so that's been fun for me to say to these guys, the more successful you are, the greater your platform, whether that allows you a call up to the big leagues or signing a contract play at whatever level, whether that's, in the community here. And for me, that goes to every level. I coach club sports, coaching club soccer. It's the same thing. How do we use sport as a platform for what's most important?
Yeah.
And in some places where we can freely share our faith, living that out. And for some places where we don't get to freely share it, how do we live that out in such a way that people are drawn to say, I want to know what's more. You're coaching for something bigger. But that always calls us as Christians to an excellence in it. Like, unapologetically, we want to win. We want to develop the highest level we can, because that's going to increase that platform for that second scoreboard.
And as we're wrapping up here, this is one of the big questions I always love to ask. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, time comes to an end, you're bringing it home, and it's like God calls you home, right? And someone's there and they say, this is what I know Josh Beers. Like, what's your legacy?
I like the way Tim Elmore says it this way. Sometime at our memorial service or celebration of life service, in between potato salad or whatever else that we're eating, some people are eating. That's what I think they have at these memorial services. Someone's gonna say, "Oh, I remember Josh," or "I remember Colton," and then they're gonna say one sentence. Mm-hmm. And my desire is that they say, "Yep, I remember Josh. He loved God. He loved people." Mm-hmm. That's a desire that I'm seeking to pursue every day of my life.
Man, I love it. And just one more thing, if you could really just send a message, guys listening to this podcast, maybe they're an athlete, maybe they're struggling with identity, maybe they're looking to, as all the things we talked about, trying to get sharper on both sides of that sword and finding that mentor. Like, what's the message you want to send out that you can encourage guys, maybe challenge them? Guys are at a different spot. What would you send out to them to kind of just build them up in this moment?
I think the first thing I'd say is God is more interested in who you're becoming than what you do. And what you do on the field, off the field, on or off the court, in your job, in your family, will actually be strengthened if you grasp that truth. As long as I'm trying to pursue it. Tom Brady, after he won his, I don't know how many Super Bowl, he said, and they caught him saying this, there's got to be something more. We have the more. And sometimes for us, whether we're never going to achieve necessarily that level, to say, you know what, if I can find my identity in who God says I am, now I'm free to live all out. And the best athlete, the best fathers, the best workers, the best leaders are people who can go all out without limitation. I think that comes from my anchor is in my relationship to God. And then I would say actively pursuing what that looks like to grow. I don't have to achieve God's acceptance. It's there. But out of grasping that kind of love that he has for me, what does it mean for me then to live all out in gratitude for the one who gave me everything? I would be saying actively pursuing that and take the pressure off. I think there's a lot that we feel in a world that's bombarding us. Take the pressure off. God's already won. Live like the champion you are because of him.
Come on. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for just joining us today and just talking about, mentorship, faith, the world, and all these pressures that are around us, staying sharp, getting mentors, and just being able to use your platform here with the Stormers and even in the community of just making God a real thing to the people here in the county, and then just around this area, really, to be honest.
Thanks for the work you all are doing, and it's been an honor, and we keep living for the audience of one.
Come on. I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today on the Men of Iron podcast. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Men of Iron podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. At Men of Iron, we exist to change a culture one man at a time, and we'd love to have you partner with us. So go to menofiron.org to see how you can get involved, or donate at menofiron.org/donate.